Australia Day celebrations have been marred by a violent protest organised by a far-left group which ended in clashes with police. The demonstration was led by a radical splinter group from the country's Green Party called Left Renewal, which positions itself as anti-capitalist and anti-police. Murad Gazdiev takes a look at how the far left is adopting some of the more sinister tactics from the other end of the spectrum.
Fascists come in all shapes, all sizes. Sometimes they're big, tattooed, shaven-headed men convinced of their racial purity. Other times, they're frail young women who just give off a bad vibe. The young woman being beaten bloody here by a gang of anti-fascists, radical liberals, was reportedly attacked merely for wearing the national flag on her bracelet. Let's make something clear. The left, liberals, stand for freedom of speech, for equality, for tolerance, against greed, against corporations. But what do you do when you're confronted with an ideology different to yours by people who believe in immigration control, in borders, and wave national flags? Calmly discuss your differences, hold a peaceful protest, turn the other cheek? Please. The radical left is on the rise. It is increasingly no longer about liberal ideas. It is about shutting down dissenting opinion, by fire if necessary. In Italy, liberal protesters attacked a van, mistakenly believing it was carrying far-right activists. In Germany, leftist youths vandalized an immigration office, saying border controls infringe on human rights. And this is happening all over Europe. But this is not confined to Europe. It is permeating the ranks of the left worldwide. Cue the United States. Try going to a liberal rally in the US and saying you support Trump.
You voted Trump! You voted Trump! Oh, yeah! Yeah, he voted Trump! Anyone have a towel? Anyone have a tissue?
You didn't say anything to anybody? You were just walking out, or what?
I was walking out with a Trump sign. They grabbed my Trump sign and started following me, saying I was like a racist and stuff.
There is a sort of irony here. The people who profess to stand for plurality, for freedom of speech, instead do their best to silence opposing views.
Often we have seen that incidents of leftist violence has not been judged by the media as extremely as it has been the case with far-right violence.
The tendency is undeniable. Liberal ideals, its utopian message, is increasingly accompanied and tarnished by violence. Smashed windows, burning cars, tear gas, screams and rioting. It is the ultra-left enforcing a regime of tolerance. Murad Gazdiev, RT.
Antifa is a far-left, radical, extremist, violent organisation. Which this man, correct?
Yep.
Are you violent?
All against fascists.
So it's okay to be violent against fascists?
Yes, because your speech is violent.
So I'm standing in front of you. You've not been violent yet. So
No. Why am I going to in this situation?
No, you just said it's okay to be violent against fascists.
Certain times, yeah.
At certain times. At certain times, it's okay to be violent. At what times, when someone has a different opinion to you? At what time is it okay to be violent?
Listen, I'm not going to debate fascists, okay?
What time is it okay?
No, I'm not debating fascists.
No, come on.
Fascists don't deserve debate. They don't deserve a platform.
But they deserve to be beaten. They deserve to be beaten.
Yeah.
So what?
Yep, your deal come. Don't worry, pal.
No one do it one-on-one. What are you doing one-on-one? Why? What are you doing? What are you doing? Boy, get off front.
You think that's cool?
Yo, chill out, man. Bro.
Yo guys, no fighting, just keep in the line, man. Let them do what they want. Where's this stuff? Where's this stuff? Where's this stuff? Not this stuff.
Stay there. All right,
I want to first of all say thank you everyone for being here tonight and say that tomorrow evening it will be my pleasure and my honour to host an event in Parliament where our friends from Hezbollah will be speaking. I've also invited friends from Hamas to come and speak as well. Unfortunately, the Israelis would not allow them to travel here, so it's going to be only friends from Hezbollah. So far as I'm concerned, that is absolutely the right function of using parliamentary facilities to invite people from other parts.
Da-na-na-na. Na-na-na-na.
Scum! Nazi 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 scum! Nazi!
Fuck off! You're behaving as badly as he is.
Yesterday was the year anniversary of the Unite the Right rally in Charlottesville, Virginia, in which a woman was fatally struck by a car that was driven into the crowd. If you followed the hyperventilating press coverage leading up to yesterday's event, you probably expected to see thousands of hooded Klansmen showing up on horseback in D.C. to commemorate and celebrate the killing. White supremacy is just that prevalent in America, they tell us. It's everywhere. Except it's not. That's a lie. White supremacy is not ubiquitous in America. It's not a crisis. It's not even a meaningful category. It is incredibly rare. You could easily live your entire life in this country without meeting a single person who believes anything like that. Most of us have lived lives like that. I have. In fact, this is a generous, tolerant country. It always has been that. People who tell you otherwise are either delusional or trying to control you with fear, likely both. In the end yesterday, just a couple of dozen people showed up out of a country of 320 million people. They milled around for a while, got yelled at, and left. So much for the Klan rally. What is a crisis in America, and a growing crisis, is left-wing extremism and violence. Our elites abet and encourage it. Our media pretend it doesn't exist. Here, for example, was the scene yesterday in Washington. Antifa lunatics calling for the destruction of the United States of America. Watch. Benny Johnson of the Daily Caller took the time to interview some of the protesters. They freely confessed they would like to torture and kill the president.
What would you do if Donald Trump showed up at the Trump? Murder him?
I mean, yo, he's America's Caesar, except he's a head. So, you gotta take him down.
Trump! If it came down to it and it was a group effort, we'd have to do him like Gaddafi.
If the president showed up at this march, what would you do, sir? Beat his
Meanwhile, in Charlottesville, protesters screamed at the cops. In D.C., they attacked police with bottles, fireworks, and eggs. Keep in mind, this is not the far right, it's the left. Cops on motorcycles were pushed as they tried to pass through the crowd. Back in Charlottesville, an NBC News reporter was assaulted by a screaming progressive. Watch this.
What's up? Don't worry about them now. Don't worry about me. Don't worry about them.
Amazingly, and it is amazing, NBC News didn't even bother to cover the assault on its own staff. The left did it, so it would have undermined their storyline. Screaming leftists in black face masks throwing bottles and calling for the destruction of America and the murder of the president. You know how CNN described this group? As, quote, anti-hate groups. Because their hate isn't really hate, it's the opposite of hate, even if it's exactly the same as hate. Pretty amusingly Orwellian, but also scary. Lying works over time, and that's exactly why they do it. Vox.com, in a rare fit of honesty, ran a piece entitled Antifa Clashes with Police and Journalists in Charlottesville and D.C. Well, that was too close to the truth for many on the left, and they complained. HuffPo, for example, did. Its hate and extremism reporter Christopher Mathias tweeted this, quote, "This is a bad article and is a good example of how not to cover white supremacy." A bad article. In other words, objective truth is bad when it obstructs the goal, which is gaining power. So lie or else, and most reporters do lie. But we don't have to lie. We can say what is obvious. The very people decrying fascism are the ones practicing fascism, crushing those who disagree with them, silencing contrary opinions, which they do constantly, threatening violence as they did yesterday. They can call it anti-hate all they want, but the truth is they would hurt you if they could.
Live fire on the streets of Caracas. Dramatic scenes as masked protesters faced off with pro-government troops. And armed military vehicles ploughed into crowds of opposition supporters. The actions came after opposition leader Juan Guaidó publicly called for a military uprising.
Así que es un momento muy importante para Venezuela.
It is a very important moment for Venezuela. We invite the world to witness what is going to happen here.
Juan Guaidó is backed by dozens of countries, including Australia, after sham elections last year. But the depth of his military support is still unclear. His envoy in Washington says he's patient.
If they arrest Juan Guaidó, the people of Venezuela will stay on the streets. So the majority of Venezuela are looking for a change, and that change will come. They won't be able to stop it. I mean, in my view, Maduro is the past.
El llamado al pueblo de Venezuela es...
The call to the Venezuelan people is to remain calm and sensible. There is no situation that has put in danger the institutions nor the democracy at this moment.
The White House has wholeheartedly backed the move to overthrow Maduro, partly due to the impact of people fleeing to surrounding countries, but also because he's backed by China, Cuba and Russia.
Moscow has already dispatched tactical advisors to Venezuela. The Trump administration believes Maduro was ready to flee the country as late as this morning, but the Russians talked him out of it. Venezuela says that's fake news.
I hope this is enough to tip Maduro out of power.
If it isn't, the US has left military intervention on the table. Zoe Daniel, ABC News, Washington.
And as maybe the only small C Conservative on this panel, maybe even in the hall, I'd like to make the following point, which is how much some of us object to the idea that there are parameters for debate and parameters of what is respectable within debate that will be decided solely on the left. There are all sorts of criteria that can be applied to your own personal judgment of what you think is right and wrong. But this debate will have to be had a lot more frankly if we're going to win it. Let me just flag up a couple of things. It will not be possible to defeat Islamist extremism whilst denigrating, for instance, people in this country who are concerned about immigration. It's not possible. Because a very, very large proportion of people in this country are concerned about immigration. It tends to be the number one, or if not number one, two issue in polling in this country. So, as it were, those people who just say, you know, people who talk about immigration all the time, you know, those people aren't beyond the pale. They might be perfectly decent. They are, in most cases, perfectly decent people who are concerned about an issue. And I don't think it should be glibly dismissed any more than people who are concerned about demographics. There are people who have serious concerns about demographics because they're seriously concerned that the society they were born into is changing beyond recognition. That doesn't mean they should be dismissed as whack job kooks or racists. They might have a perfectly legitimate point. I think they do. There are standards and norms which we can certainly express, but we should be exceedingly careful, I would submit, about where we draw those lines. Because before you know it, you'll be chucking out people who may well have perfectly legitimate points to make and who may well have, believe it or not, a larger following than any of us here tonight could ever have. We spend all of our time, and quite rightly, shouldn't stop doing it, differentiating out between different types of Islam, different types of Muslims, and so on and so forth. But the minute it's a group of white, middle-aged men, it's with huge delight that people decide, excellent, we will dismiss them as one single block, no need to investigate further. Let me give you an example. The English Defence League. But, you know, for instance, Louis Amis wrote a very interesting piece in Standpoint magazine some months ago after investigation, and he said, and others have said, that as far as they can see within the EDL, they have tried to kick out BNP elements. Does that mean that they aren't racist, or they are? I'm not making a definitive point, I'm just saying these things are extremely complex, and we ought to be careful before dismissing whole swathes of people. Thirdly, these groups stop the Islamization of Europe and stop the Islamization of America. Paedophile priests, you said. You know, if you'd have just stood there and said, you know, I mean, I'm trying to protect Muslims from paedophile imams, people would go, oh, how Islamophobic. And actually, in that case, it probably would be. But you say paedophile priests and smear the Catholic priesthood, and it's not a problem. Guardian, the leading left-wing newspaper, had Richard Gott, one of its editors, a paid member of the KGB. A paid KGB agent who said, oh, it was just a bit of a laugh. Oh, and it still is just a bit of a laugh. Because if it's communism, it's a bit of a laugh. 70 million dead here and there, a bit of a laugh. And so on. So please, let's adjust our fucking values. And finally, Some of the people who people in this hall would throw out from being ever allowed to speak are being thrown out because once they met somebody who once sat on a platform with somebody who was once a member of a fascist party. Well, I'm sitting on a platform with a communist. That would mean I could never again speak in public if there was any sense to this debate, but there isn't, because people have this debate so ruddy badly. All spend their time polishing their halos. Yes, we're against racism. Yes, we're against fascism. We're against lots of things, but we're going to require a bit more than that, and a bit more of this halo polishing if you're going to deal with that. And as I say, it'll leave you with one final thought on that. If this battle is going to be won, it will not be won solely by the people sitting in Conway Hall here tonight. It will be won by a lot of people. We will have to make judgments along the way, and we'll disagree with them. I'll disagree with Mariam, I'll disagree with Shiraz, and all sorts of friends and colleagues. We'll disagree on individual cases and people. But the idea that you chuck whole swathes of people out of the debate is such a bloody left-wing thing to do. The left loves doing this all the time. The debate will be done on my terms. Well, how easy and how unsurprising it is that the terms are always drawn around themselves. I hope we can do a bit better than that. Thank you.
We've only been at the march for 2 seconds. We've just been chased out of the centre of the Antifa protest. We've just been walking through the centre of Trafalgar Square, and already Antifa have been crowding around us, calling us Nazis, screaming at the camera. The police have surrounded us.
What? Look. I don't understand what's the need for violence from all of you every time. Why can't any of you just talk? Now, we're going to report on the demonstration that's this way. Are we allowed to report on the demonstration? Yeah, it's your, obviously, officers, I'd like if you just keep the violence at minimum from the fascists. George, we're going to report this way on the demonstration. Come on. Come on. When you witness men with their faces covered acting violently, yeah, why is that not reported? Why the only pictures you look for are Englishmen who have aggressive faces or bald heads? And then you run a story every time, because I've watched it for the last 8 years. So the reason why we've come here today is to try and report a true observation of what's happening today. And so far, we've seen, well, this looks very calm and orderly. But down there, we've just seen violence and fascism. So yeah, I'll explain that loads of people with their faces covered, screaming, acting aggressively, holding sticks. Now, will you report on that? Will any of you people report the truth of what's happened today? You won't, will you? So we'll look out for the stories from all of you journalists who are all lying to the general public about the truth of what happens at demonstrations like these. For The Guardian? Yeah, you're losing money every week, aren't you? Yeah? You're in the negative, aren't you? Is that it? That's it. You're a propaganda machine. Do one. Can I ask you, are you against Sharia law being in the UK?
Well, I'm not here to discuss Sharia law because Sharia law...
Did we get that? So we want Sharia law?
Well, no, I'm not saying that we want Sharia law.
Is your idea...
I want to live in peace amongst people from many different nationalities, like I have been doing for a number.
Can you... Okay, let's cut the bullshit. We want a yes or no answer. Are you against Sharia law ever being implemented in the UK?
I'm not saying I'm against it all.
Discussion over. It's discussion over. What do you think of the fact that we're continually told by the mainstream media that Britain First are a racist organisation?
It's not a racist organisation. They have different race. I'm also supporting it.
Have you felt welcome here?
Yes.
Great, nice to meet you, man. And it's good. It's good. So this is where we get the violence. Yeah. Every time. Look. Excuse me. Can I talk to you? Can I talk? Yeah. Is that an argument? Excuse me, can I ask you a question?
You racist twats! You cannot ask these questions!
What's wrong with you? I don't understand. He's going to nick me for what? I'm not preaching a peace.
I know. All he said is, just go straight to your car.
Go or I'll get nicked. That's insane. Go or I'll be arrested. I haven't done anything.
Some conditions, he said, I don't.
Did you do that? You'll be arrested. I haven't done anything. I haven't done anything. I'm not part of this organisation. Yeah? I'm here to report the truth on what's happened at this demonstration today. And I'm now being threatened with arrest by the British police for simply doing that.
Probably think your opinions matter. You probably think you're an individual with unique experiences, thoughts, and ambitions. Well, I hate to break it to you, but according to current leftist orthodoxy, you're wrong. You see, your opinion only matters relative to your identity and where that identity ranks on the hierarchy of intersectionality. If you're now thinking, what the hell are you talking about? You haven't spent much time on a modern college campus. Intersectionality is a form of identity politics in which the value of your opinion depends on how many victim groups you belong to. At the bottom of the totem pole is the person everybody loves to hate, the straight white male. And who's at the top? Well, it's very hard to say because new groups claim victim status all the time. No one can keep track. So, how does this intersectionality thing play out? Something like this. Let's say you're a gay white woman. Your opinion matters, but less than that of a gay black woman. Why? Because while all women are oppressed by the patriarchy, and all gays are oppressed by the heterosexual majority, blacks have a victim status that whites obviously don't. Of course, a gay black woman's victim status is less than that of a black trans woman, who ranks below a black Muslim trans woman, and so on. The more memberships you can claim in oppressed groups, the more aggrieved you are, and the higher you rank. Get it? Good, because it's about to get even more complicated. Intersectionality takes your victim status and uses it as the basis for creating alliances with other victim groups. 30 or 40 years ago, activists encouraged racial solidarity among blacks to combat oppression. But today, that's not enough. Today's activists demand blacks make common cause with other allegedly oppressed people: gays, lesbians, transgenders, Palestinians, Native Americans, whomever. Here's the logic. A black gay and a Hispanic gay may not belong to the same victim group racially, but they do belong to the same victim group on the basis of their sexuality. By focusing on the places where various victim identities intersect, intersectionality creates a united us versus them paradigm, righteous victims rising up together to fight the oppressor, those dreaded straight white men. This explains why at a rally protesting the treatment of Palestinians by Israel, you might see a contingent of lesbian activists. That's intersectionality at work. They're so united by their victim status that it doesn't matter if Islamists throw gays off of buildings or murder female family members who defy their father's wishes. Victim solidarity trumps all other considerations. The term intersectionality was coined by Kimberly Crenshaw, a professor of law at Columbia University. She explains that intersectionality was my attempt to make feminism, anti-racist activism, and anti-discrimination law do what I thought they should: highlight the multiple avenues through which racial and gender oppression were experienced. To Crenshaw, America is a terrible place full of victim groups, each with their particular set of grievances. Why shouldn't these victim groups get together and form a political coalition unified by the belief that the majority society has harmed them? That some professor tucked away in an ivory tower would come up with this nonsense is not surprising. What is surprising and disturbing is that so many people actually go along with it. America is the most open, least racist nation on the planet. That Professor Crenshaw is free to spin her nonsensical theories and get paid well for it should offer adequate proof of that. And since when do you have to live someone's experience in order to understand them? You don't have to live as a slave in order to understand that slavery is cruel and wrong. You don't have to live as a woman in order to recognize the evil of rape. Finally, and most important, intersectionality promotes the biggest hoax of all, that we aren't individuals who are to be judged on the basis of how we act, but are merely members of groups to be judged on the basis of our group identity. In other words, you and I, as individuals with our unique experiences, thoughts, and ambitions, count for nothing. Our racial and sexual identity count for everything. It's hard to imagine an idea less likely to produce a free and equal America than that. But what do I know? I'm just a straight white male. I'm Ben Shapiro for Prager University.
You're just a social construct, man. Get out of my face. Postmodernism? That's easy. If there is one thing that is confusing as hell, it is postmodernism. Because it's actually not even a philosophy, it's just a way of analyzing things. At its heart, postmodernism is a critique of modernism, go figure, and of structures. Sometimes postmodernism is referred to as post-structuralism, Well, what does that mean? Well, you know, because what it means is that postmodernism is a critique of what we assume to be real. Postmodernism argues that there's no absolute truth and that the basic structures on which we've built our whole society are just social constructs. So some of these social constructs could include power relations, gender binaries, social classes, all the kinds of things that we take for granted and we assume are real or fixed. Postmodernism actually plays with, satirizes, or just completely deconstructs and says, well, no, these actually aren't necessarily true or inherently true. They are things that we've created as a society or as cultures, and now we just believe to be the truth. So, one of the constructs that postmodernism wants to break down is the whole idea of good versus evil. It also wants to break down this idea of the binary male and female. Which brings us to why postmodernism is such a difficult concept to work with as a student, because there's really no set or agreed upon definition of it. It's again simply a way of analyzing or critiquing different frameworks, but isn't one idea in and of itself. So it's important to remember that there's lots of people who came from a very diverse background and from many different situations in life that considered themselves postmodernists or were considered by other people to be postmodernists, but didn't subscribe to a set of values that everybody agreed upon and decided, okay, this is what postmodernism means. So much so, in fact, that nobody even can agree upon whether or not we're still in the postmodern era. So postmodernism is generally believed to have been started somewhere in the late 19th century as kind of a reaction to the hyper-rationalism of people at the time. People who were arguing that there were different scientific theories or religious theories that could explain everything. Postmodernism, on the other hand, argued that nothing was purely objective, and that all of these things, all of these assumptions and different structures that people were coming up with were predicated upon, well, society, the cultures that they came out of, that there was no true objective truth because people basically would come in and screw it up and put in their own sorts of ideas and make everything really confusing. Still confused? Don't worry, most people are. Like I said before, there is no agreed upon definition of postmodernism, but basically you can think of it as any view that, post the modern period, that is challenging the norm, that is challenging ideas of structure, of binaries, of rational thought. That's what postmodernism is supposedly in opposition to. Essentially, to summarize, postmodernism is really more about challenging certain structures rather than being something in and of itself. So no wonder it's so bloody complicated, because nobody can agree on what it actually means. The best way to understand it is to go out and look at postmodern architecture, literature, what else? Probably music. Yeah, that'll work. A bird just flew by the window. That might be postmodernism. Philip Glass.
Antifa!
Antifa are trouble, ignored by police, following the herd, breach the peace. They're bourgeoisie coming for whitey.
You're fucking a white male!
They're paranoid, brainwashed by their teachers on their campuses. They are all girls who are boys who drink soy to be girls. Why do boys look like girls and the girls look like boys? You never could be someone to really avoiding all work, but there's plenty available. They prefer immigration. Count your IQ on 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 fingers. They are all wasters who should not reproduce. You wear fancy knickers at your transgressions. Fuck Antifa and your abuse. Girls who are boys who drink soy to be girls. Why do boys look like girls and the girls look like boys? You never could be someone to really love. Girls who are boys who drink soy to be girls. Why do boys look like girls and the girls look like boys? You never could be someone to really love. Girls who are boys who drink soy to be girls. Why do boys look like girls and the girls look like boys? You never could be someone to really love. Girls who are boys who drink soy to be girls. Why do boys look like girls and the girls look like boys? You never could be someone to really love. Girls who are boys who drink soy to be girls. Why do boys look like girls and the girls look like boys?